Well, hello. Welcome to the first ever podcast of Faith Community Church.
You don't have a beard anymore.
I did have a beard.
We just wrapped up our latest teaching series, which was about the life of Jonah, or at least a section of his life.
Just as a pastor at times, I can start getting really frustrated with Jonah-like people.
How do you handle miracles and when people just want to dismiss Jonah right off the bat?
I know God's been at work in my heart through this whole pandemic in ways that would not have happened had the pandemic not happened.
If we had an enemy like Nineveh, we would have a much easier time rooting for God's judgment in this story. I feel like a lot of the tribalism, a lot of the division that we're experiencing right now is a battle for the soul of our country.
Either Bufus or Buford, I think so far is what we got going on.
This podcast is an opportunity to have an open conversation about the topics that we cover on a regular basis through our teaching series at FCC. But we're going to do it in a little bit less formal and a more conversational way. My name is Kevin Christopher, and I'm here with Tim Porter, lead pastor, and Tim Prince, pastor for community at FCC. So say hello, guys.
Howdy.
Hello, guys.
There you go.
There we go.
Well, right off the bat, you may have noticed that our podcast does not have a name yet, as most podcasts do have a name, and we're working on that, but we want to let you know that you can actually help us work on that as well. Later in this episode, you will learn how you can be part of helping us name this podcast. So stick with us to the end, and we'll share with you how you can submit your ideas and even have a chance to win a $25 gift card. So
Are we eligible to do that?
That's a great question.
You are not eligible.
Oh.
Before we get started, and before I begin to engage with these two fine gentlemen over here, let me tell you why we have decided to start up a new podcast. As we all know, the world is rapidly changing with our COVID pandemic, and that pandemic has only accelerated some of the cultural changes that had already been taking place for years. Now, more than ever before, organizations are leaning into digital content to get their message out to the world. And it's no different here at FCC. In response to these massive cultural shifts, we're trying to provide more digital content for these times in which we find ourselves. Lately, we don't get to be with each other physically as much as we might like to, but we're really grateful that we have technology that affords us the opportunity to stay connected digitally. And even as things will eventually start to open up again, our goal is to continue to have these podcasts available so that you can look forward to engaging with them as we roll out each sermon series, one about every month or so. We hope that you find these podcasts helpful to the point where you actually want to share these podcasts with others. And maybe that these podcasts could spark conversations with others in your life, the people that you know and love. The format that we'll be doing here will be more relaxed and more unscripted than, standing up on the stage, giving a sermon, which will give us a chance to hear the more personal reflections of you both. We're going to cover important topics that we're trying to aim at people, topics that we all think about every day, and we want to engage with those in an open dialogue. So now, without further ado, let's get to know Tim and Tim. Some people in our audience may not know much about both of you, so if you could each take a few moments to just tell us who you are, what's important to you, your family, what are your interests?
Good. You want to go first?
Sure, I can go first.
Okay. First, why don't you start with your beard? You were on vacation and you came back and you don't have a beard anymore.
I did have a beard.
Okay.
There's a beard right here. So I went on vacation, and often when I'm gone for a whole week, I take advantage of that opportunity to really mess with my facial hair. So I went back to my 20s and shaved it all off. It was really nice, but my wife doesn't like it. So this is where she wants it. So this is where it'll probably stay for a while. Yeah. The problem is that there's a lot of white in my beard, and it's in a skunk-like pattern.
So you have a stink face?
I have a stink face. Yeah. Okay. So that's why I did it. But what Darcy wants, Darcy gets. So
Darcy's your wife.
I'm married to Darcy. We have 3 boys, Caleb, Ben, and Jordan, and so a middle schooler and 2 elementary school kids. And that is my hobby.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that I have many hobbies beyond just hanging out with my kids and
a good hobby.
Yeah, we play a lot of backyard football and a lot of video games at our house. And what else?
Board games.
A lot of board games and reading books together, which is a good life. I have a good life. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm Tim Porter, and so maybe we want to talk about Porter and Prince maybe as we go
That
through.
would be good.
If you're on the audio and you can't be distinguished between the two of us, it's a possibility. But married to my wife, DJ, 26 years in June of this year, June 25th. Yeah, woohoo! She's endured me for 26 years. And then we have 3 sons. We have Levi, who's going back to college in Louisville in person this fall. And he's starting his sophomore year of college down there. And then we have Ian, who's 17 and loving the summer right now, and Seth, who is 13. And so we have 3 boys as well. My own personal hobbies, I love mowing the lawn. I love camping. I get to go camping next week. I'm looking forward to that. And Boundary Waters, and then we garden, and I love to read as well. So there you go.
So not only do you have the same names, you both have 3 children.
Yeah.
You're both married.
3 boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. 3 boys.
I had a guy reach out to me this week asking to meet with the bearded Tim who preaches on Sunday. And I said, you're going to have to narrow it down.
Oh, the bearded Tim that preaches on Sundays that has 3 boys.
Yeah.
That's handsome.
Yeah.
And,
So I said, well, you're going to meet with the handsome one. Is that okay? I didn't say that.
anyway. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into our Jonah series and have some conversations about it. We just wrapped up our latest teaching series, which was about the life of Jonah, or at least a section of his life, and we entitled it Running from God. And that's an interesting title. I want to hear your thoughts on why we chose that name. Why is that pertinent to this book?
Yeah, because that's great. I'll start, and then you can go add what you would like as well. We're running from God. Jonah is given the mission from God to go to Nineveh and talk to, and actually warn the people of Nineveh about that God is he's not going to tolerate their evil anymore, and that he's going to do something about it. And Jonah, the third verse in the book, is just like he got up and he does what every other prophet doesn't do in the Bible. He gets up and he runs away. And so the reality is that one of the things that Jonah teaches us, I think, or the life of Jonah teaches us, is that all of us are runners, and we run from God in some way, and so it can be a heart related thing, that we're just running from God in our hearts, not physically, or it can actually be, nope, God's telling me to go do this, and I'm going to go do the exact opposite thing. And so the book of Jonah does, I think, 2 things really well. It exposes our own hearts and where we have a propensity to run, but then also the God who runs after us. And so those are a couple reasons. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Tim.
I don't know that I'd have much to add to that. Everybody in the book of Jonah is running from God. And we thought everybody pretty much could resonate with that. So, yeah.
Well, Porter, I've heard you say many, many times that Jonah is your favorite book. And even on top of that as we've been going through this, you're like, wow, it's even better than I remembered. Can you explain kind of some of the wows that you've experienced this time around?
Sure.
And why is it your favorite book?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So I started reading Jonah seriously in seminary. So in seminary, you take different classes on the Bible, but then also you learn the languages that the Bible was written in. Hebrew in the Old Testament, or the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and then the New Testament was written in Greek. And so I learned those, and at a prof who was teaching us Hebrew, and the book that we worked through to understand the language better and start using it was the book of Jonah, because the book of Jonah it's story-like, or it's a story, but then also there's poetry in it. So it just gives you in a short book, gives you a good breadth of experience in the Hebrew language. That's when I started reading through it, and in a serious kind of way. And then I had opportunity to teach Hebrew, and I'm like, well, you do what you've been taught. And so I used the book of Jonah to be able to teach others Hebrew, and then I just started to grow on me and grow on me and grow on me. And I started to see myself in Jonah a great deal, but then just the picture that the life of Jonah gives and the book of Jonah gives of God and his mercy, a God who cares about evil and at the same time, a God who's compassionate on a city that is so wicked that he wants to overthrow it. This God is just too good to make up. And then it's hard to figure out who God is more patient with. Is he more patient with Nineveh, or is he more gracious and patient with Jonah? Who goes through this? So that's just been this compelling side. So every time I read through the book of Jonah, I'm learning something new. And as we were doing our deep dive, as we call it, doing our deep dive, preparing for this series. You guys heard me say it often. I was like, I can't believe that God is actually really like this.
Blows you away.
Yeah, it just blows me away. It's like, oh my goodness, God is just so amazing. This is amazing. Look what he's doing. And look at how he treats Jonah, and look at how he treats Nineveh. And, we all have these conceptions of what God should be like and what we think he's like. But then the Bible comes in and says, no, this is what he's really like. Yeah. And we've not seen him for just how good he really is. Yeah. And so, just as a pastor at times, I can start getting really frustrated with like Jonah-like people. It's like, oh, look at the mission, look at the harvest, look at all the people out there that we need to help meet, know, and follow Jesus. And I was just caught back again as like, you know what, I'm far more like Jonah than I tend to see other people to be Jonah-like, and how God just patiently and kindly and personally works on Jonah's heart and draws him back is just. I was just astounded by that. Yeah. This time reading it through. Yeah.
And so, Prince, you're a bearded Tim preacher with 3 kids, and Jonah's your favorite book as well.
It's not. No. There's one way we can differentiate.
Yeah.
The Tims.
So I want the Tim that Jonah is not his favorite book.
I should say I really do like Jonah. It's not my favorite book, but
what is your favorite book?
Ephesians is my favorite book.
Good choice.
Yeah. Yeah, probably for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned for Jonah.
Yeah.
Well, my question for you, Prince, is of all the themes in Jonah, which one kind of stirred your heart the most along the way?
Tim's already talked about it a number of times already, but just the...
Are you saying that I used way too many words? Is that what you're saying? Oh my goodness.
Just the character.
That was like you just sort of slammed me. I've talked about it plenty of times, many times already.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The character of God, and it's hard to use just one word. So the character of God is a big umbrella for the theme of God's kindness and his patience with Jonah. Not just with Jonah, but his patience with Nineveh. With everyone in his patience with the sailors, his kindness to them. Grace is probably the best one-word summary of the theme in Jonah that strikes me most, grabs me most, and is it's not even, I was going to say it's too good to be true or it's unbelievable. It's not even that. I get it, but it's just, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just so different than we are and anything else.
And for the listeners, how might that change somebody's life, knowing that kind of grace that you're talking about?
Oh boy, I think when you begin, I'm not going to say when you get your head around God's grace, 'cause I don't know when that would happen, but when you begin to understand how patient God is with you, the way that he is with Jonah, the way that he is with Nineveh and everyone else. When you get a glimpse of that, you can't respond to other people as impatiently as you did before. So you can't snap at your kids at the same rate that you did before you read Jonah. If you're understanding it even a little bit, or your neighbor or your boss or whoever it is, if you're understanding it at all, it should make you a more gracious, patient, generous person. Otherwise, you didn't read it right.
Yeah. Well, Porter, there are a lot of miracles in the book of Jonah.
Really? Is that right?
Yeah. Including Jonah being swallowed by a huge fish and surviving it. God makes plants to grow and sends worms. He sends storms and stops storms. He even made a whole city to follow him, which just seems astounding. A lot of people get skeptical when they hear about miracles, and I just wanted to hear from you. How do you handle miracles? And when people just want to dismiss Jonah right off the bat because of the miracles, what would you say to somebody? Why would they want to consider a little further?
That's really good. One, I just want to give a resource just for follow-up, because that's a big question, and there's been a lot written about it. But C.S. Lewis has a great book called Miracles that is really helpful, and if a listener wants to dig into it a little bit more, I highly recommend starting there. And then also another guy named William Lane Craig has done some really great work on miracles. But I think one of the things that the Bible does is it does push against our naturalistic worldview, that things are just happening, and that you can always see a cause and effect kind of relationship and that kind of stuff. And so and I think one of the things that comes across, like if you want to look at it intellectually, like I'm skeptical of miracles. I've had to push through some of those things and wrestle with some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And I think, and some we all have. So it's not like we just sit there and go, oh yeah, well, the Bible says it, so I got to be true. I mean, you got to wrestle with it. I'm like, I don't see this in everyday life. You don't see a fish swallowing a guy in everyday life, unless you're watching, 1980s Jaws or something like that. But they don't survive. And so the push on it. And so the thing that I always wrestled with was like, well, you can't prove miracles in a laboratory. Well, I know they're not, laboratories can't prove miracles, but also I think the other thing that was helpful for me to realize, and laboratories can't disprove miracles either. And so that was part of it, that's just starting to open that up a little bit more. But then, there is this humility, I think, that comes like, boy, if there is a God who created everything, and he holds everything together, and he's personally involved, as the Bible shows, then he can do these things because he's the one that first created it all to begin with. And I think one of the things that the book of Jonah pushes on us and challenges us is not just, can God do miracles, but that in everyday normal things, God's involved, right? So a storm, we look at it and go, oh, well, we can look at the forecast and we can put those things together. But what if God is intentionally doing something with storms? Not just like trying to punish us, but it's like he's trying to accomplish something there. So in these natural events, God is working at the same time. And I think that's the bigger push, not just so much miracles, but it's like, do I see God in my circumstances working on me and working in the things around me? That's even a further push, And I've experienced that. Like even with, you opened up with talking about just the differences in the advantages and disadvantages and difficulties with COVID. I know God's been at work in my heart through this whole pandemic in ways that would not have happened had the pandemic not happened. Your character wouldn't have been developed in that way. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so it's to see that God was at work in the midst of those things, not just in the miraculous, but it's like in the normal occurring events of a storm, God's doing something. And so it starts to open up your world of, oh wait, God's at work. So I know the question was mine, but you probably want to answer. You probably want to say something too.
Oh, I would just add to that. You mentioned God being at work in the storm, in the ordinary things. I just think of COVID. I think of everything that we're going through right now. That it isn't just a science problem, but there's the question should always be, well, what is God doing here? Why has He allowed this? What does He want to do in us and change in us? I mean, I'm certain God wants to do some things in His people and in the world through this storm, just as an example. We're living the book of Jonah right now, if we have eyes to see it. So
that's good.
And it's a miracle.
Prince, in this book, there is another thing that's kind of hard to struggle with, and that is that the whole point of Jonah is that He sent Jonah to go speak against the city and let them know that they were going to be destroyed. That's another thing that people really struggle with, that God would destroy a city. Why would he do that?
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know how you've wrestled with that, and hear your thoughts on that.
So I have a number of thoughts. One is that the discomfort with God's judgment against a place like Nineveh is a luxury that we have where we live, because we haven't experienced a lot of really profound and prolonged injustice, violent injustice. Mm-hmm. That's a privilege that we have in the West, mm-hmm. that a lot of the rest of the world doesn't enjoy. And so
we're kind of sheltered from gross injustice.
If we had an enemy like Nineveh, we would have a much easier time rooting for God's judgment in this story. In the Bible and in most of the rest of the world, the question is not why would God punish or judge a city like Nineveh. The question is, what is taking so long? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, we kind of live in our news bubble here, but I don't know if you pay any attention right now to like what's happening in Yemen, for example, but it's what's happening there is horrific. Mm-hmm. There are horrific stories of violent people using violence to inflict horrific injury on innocent people. There are children today, as we speak, starving to death in Yemen. And the question is not, why would God judge those people? But, Lord, what is taking so long? Yeah. You're being too patient.
When you say judge, you mean bring justice.
Bring justice, yeah. Bring an end to this violence. And Nineveh, it doesn't come out in Jonah as much, but it comes out in other stories in the Old Testament. And we have a lot of ancient documents that talk about what kind of violence Nineveh perpetrated on its neighbors. It's horrific. They make ISIS look like Boy Scouts. And some of the things that they would do to people, and I won't describe them because they're too horrific. And so the question in Jonah isn't, why would God bring judgment or destruction on a city like that? I agree with Jonah in saying, why would you show mercy? Mm-hmm. I don't understand. After everything they've done, why give them 40 days? That is the real question. If you're reading it from the perspective of the people who first received this story, the shocking part of the story is, God is going to do what with Nineveh? Yeah. After all that they've done.
Most people would feel the way Jonah felt.
Yeah, and there are pockets in our world right now where that's still the case. It's not here in Hudson right now, but that's the bigger question.
With COVID and all the latest riots and such, lots of like large scale, the butting of heads of what's the right way to handle society with COVID, with race relations, all those kinds of things. What can we learn from Jonah on that front?
Yeah, no, that's good. I would say there's a few different things. I'll start, and then you can make it better.
I can?
Yes, I will.
Yes, you will. You usually do. I think one of the things that stands out to me is, and I just preached this, last week. The last chapter of Jonah is God brings this plant into Jonah's life, and it grows up, and it's the first time we see Jonah happy in the book. He's like, oh, this plant's so great. It's shading me. First time he's happy. And then God brings destruction on the plant because Jonah wants destruction on the city, and God brings destruction on this plant, and the plant withers and dies. And then hot wind, God causes hot wind, Middle Eastern wind to blow, and then Jonah gets to this point where he's fainting because it's so hot, and he's so angry that he wants to die, and he's so angry that that God would bring destruction on this plant, and he wants the plant back, and he has pity on this plant. And right in that moment, God has Jonah exactly where he wants him, because now in that moment, with Jonah just having this plant that was just there for a day, and he has pity on it, Jonah is experiencing God's heart for Nineveh. in that, God comes back to Jonah and just says, look, you had this plant come up. You just experience it for, just for a day. You didn't do anything to grow it or anything like that. I just gave it to you as a gift. And now that you don't have it in your life, you don't want the world without it.
Yeah, he gave it to give him relief.
To give him relief, yeah, exactly. And he didn't do anything for it, or Jonah didn't invest in it at all. And then God says, now, there's 120,000 people and a lot of cows that I've invested all kinds of time in. These are people that I've provided for, that made them in my image, and I provide daily for them, and I give them all kinds of things. And you, Jonah, didn't invest anything in this plant, and you have pity for it, and you don't want to live without it. Jonah, now you understand a little bit of my heart. And I think one of the things that can so easily happen, and this is one of the things I think, let me tie in one other piece here, why I think the God of the Bible is true and unlike any other God. And every other God is made up, and the God of the Bible isn't, because the gods of the nations and the gods of ancient Near East and all that kind of stuff, they were always on the side of the powerful, and they were always on the side of the people that worshiped them. The God of the Bible, the God of the Bible is on the side of His creation, and even if when that is an enemy, even if that's an enemy of Israel, God says, "I care about that people." And I think one of the things that we can do to God in this time, especially with a lot of tribalism, is that we can start to think God is only on my side and He's against my enemy. And God says, no, your enemy is actually my creation, that I'd rather die than destroy. And until we start to see that, that every human being matters, and every human being God cares about.
Maskers matter.
Yeah.
Unmaskers
matter. Totally. That's exactly right.
Every race.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And every race and every ethnic group, every tribe, so the Bible talks about how one day every tribe and people group is going to be represented before Jesus as those whom Jesus purchased and bought. And the whole tribe language has started to change on me now, where it's not just like ethnic group, it's like different small or special interest groups within a people group. It's like, oh, that's very interesting to me. So I think that's an important thing. And so it's, God was on the side of the enemy of Jonah. He was on the side of the enemy of Jonah, and because God cares about them. And so I don't know if you want to improve on that at all.
I'm not going to improve on it, but just an extra, another thought. One thing that struck me in this study of Jonah that I hadn't seen before is that Jonah, in not wanting to go to Nineveh, Jonah is not being a reactionary. He's not a basement blogger. He's not a crackpot. Because in the end of Nineveh's story, we don't see it in Jonah, but in the end, Nineveh did destroy Jonah's nation. So the city that Jonah was sent to and that had this great revival and that God spared destroyed Jonah's nation. But actually wiped it off the face of the earth, and has not returned.
He could see that coming. That's what
he could see it coming. And that really struck me in this study, because I feel like a lot of the tribalism, a lot of the division that we're experiencing right now is a battle for the soul of our country. What does it mean to be American? And what is the American Republic really supposed to be about? And the sides, and there are like a million of them now, but the sides involved believe that the other side is going to destroy the American Republic, the American experiment, whatever you want to call it, is going to destroy it. And what I see in Jonah, first of all, I personally feel that. I think that it would be a travesty to have the American Republic or American experiment fall to pieces. I think it would be a tremendous loss to the world and to us and to our children and grandchildren. So I feel that. But when I come to Jonah, I'm reminded God is sovereign over nations. All empires fall sooner or later. And God knows what He's going to do, and His commandment is love your enemy, even if they destroy the thing that you think is most valuable.
That's a radical message.
Yeah, because ultimately we belong to another king and another kingdom. I'm not saying we shouldn't fight some of these battles.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But in the end, God is always doing something bigger,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not out of his control. And he may send us to love people who will destroy
That's good.
our way of life and our and God is saying, actually, this is part of something much bigger that I'm doing. So I want you to obey.
Yeah, that's really good.
And hard.
Yeah.
And hard.
Just-
What God is like that?
You have to be able to look at that other tribe, whatever tribe you belong to, look at that other tribe and say, I can see into the future. I know what you're going to do to my children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
I want you to know about Jesus, that you might be saved.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's hard.
Well, we got a few minutes left, so kind of a lightning round here. I'd like to give some takeaways to people. So each of you, give one takeaway from the book of Jonah that you have experienced, and then one that you would, maybe it's the same one, but one that you would recommend for others to take away and apply to their life.
Yeah, so I'd say for me, like where I started to resonate a little bit more this time with Jonah was with leading a church during a pandemic and going, man, this is really hard. And I didn't have a seminary class for this. And hopefully they're developing them for the next generations. And I wanted to run. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to lead this. I'd rather, like, one of the things I say to my wife all the time is like, I just want to go back to the good old days when I worked at UPS and, you know, just sort of move boxes around and I can leave it at home. And so there's
Leave
this
it at work.
temptation. Yeah, leave it at work. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Leave it at work. Although, you know, we all are working at home from now. So who knows? But to be able to do that and God's saying, look, Tim, I'm doing something in you, through you, and through the church in this time, and I will lead you. I'll provide. And so it's that was one way in which I identify with Jonah running is like God gave him something really hard to do, and he didn't want to do it, and yeah, so I resonated in that way.
Another big takeaway for me from Jonah was Jonah, before God called Jonah to go to Nineveh, Jonah was doing well. Jonah was a good guy. And life was fine.
Yeah.
Until God threw this total wrench, you know, into his life. And I really resonated with that. So I've just in the last year or so, you know, I've had moments where I'm just like, I liked my life when it was simple and I understood it. I don't like what you're doing, God. And I would rather run.
Yeah.
So that's Jonah's spoken to me very personally in some of that.
Yeah. Again, lightning round, but
Yeah.
for the
Speed it up, Porter. Speed it up.
for the skeptic, someone that might not know God or is still, you know, on the fence, what's something that even they could take away? What could anybody take away from the book of Jonah that would be good for their life?
God is being patient with you right now, and he loves you. There's a warning and comfort in Jonah for you. God wants your attention.
That's good. Good lightning.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to stick with that.
Yeah, he's done now.
No, I think that's really good.
God is being patient with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, being patient with you and seek him out.
Yeah, he wants your attention.
Awesome. Well, that's it. That was a good conversation.
Wow.
Thank you,
That was
guys.
so fast.
Yeah.
Good job, us.
Good job, us.
Good job, us.
Yeah, great discussion. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up, or you?
I'd just love to hear your thoughts on my beard and how good
It'll get better.
How good it.
Your beard will get
This is what it's going to be now,
Okay.
right here.
I love you.
Thank
and
you.
I love your beard.
Thank you.
If your wife loves it, man, keep it.
That's big. basically the only vote that matters.
Yeah. The only thing I would say too is that just as we're looking for a name for the podcast, we also need a name for our bulldog.
Yeah, what did you call it?
It's either Bufus or Buford. I think so far is what we got going on. So
we need some more. We need some more options. So that's right. You guys can help us name our podcast or the dog. I mean, you can send that too. If you have a great, simple name for our podcast that would be inviting and compelling to all kinds of people to engage with this content, we'd love to hear your ideas. So what you can do is send your submission to Faith Community, one word, faithcommunity@fcchudson.com. And if we choose your submission, we will send you a $25 gift card to a local Hudson restaurant. So that's a nice perk. Yeah. He's going to tell all his friends. That's faithcommunity@fcchudson.com. So just submit your idea to us, and we'd love to see what you come up with. Well, before we go, we just want to remind you to please share this podcast with others. Please reach out to one another and have conversations about these important topics. You can also, on that Faith Community at FCCHudson.com, you can also send us your questions, maybe get to know you questions, or just hard God questions that you've been wondering about. We'd love to have a conversation about those as well. Well, that's the end of our first ever Faith Community podcast, yet to be named podcast. So keep an eye out for episode 2 coming your way in about a month or so. And until then, keep those important conversations moving with those that you love. And you never know how God might show up and change your life and your relationships through those conversations. So keep that open. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Say goodbye, guys.
Bye, guys.